Hi folks, thanks for coming. I'm done. So you've come to hear me speak. Those of you who have not seen me speak before, I'm going to apologise in advance. You're all cunts. Essentially, I'm sometimes described as a computer user non-technical, so for those of you who are unaware, that means cunt. There's also computer user non-technical operator, which is cunto for short. That's also described as a kind of precursor. Nobody's left so far. Offence is subjective. I won't intentionally attempt to offend you, but if you get offended, that's your own fucking problem, really. And as Neil Lyons put it perfectly at SteelCon last year, if you come to one of Andy's talks and get offended, you're a fucking muppet. So, yeah. Any questions so far? Anyone offended yet? Don't worry, we'll get there. So before we dive in, bit of an intro. I'm not a blue teamer. I do a bit of red teaming and a bit of purple teaming. Team purple. Woo! It's also fancy graphics. I was asked before my talk if there'd be anything inappropriate in my talk. And I said, no, don't worry. I'm just Andy. And Sarah said, that's fine. So that's the disclaimer. So a bit of about me. I'm Andy Gill. I was described last night as the Frankie Boyle of InfoSec, so that's a really bad title, but alas. I'm a senior red teamer at Pentest Partners, who are sponsoring the conference. Go and check them out in the sponsors area. I write a blog and I wrote a book. Who's read my book? Go fucking buy my book. It's free. Go and read it. Even if you don't know about security. I don't know about security and I've read it. I've not read it, but yeah. I'm also the co-host of OuijaCast. So OuijaCast is a podcast that myself and one of my mates started back in June. The tagline is not safe for work, not safe for life, because essentially it's two Glaswegians interviewing people, saying cunt a lot, essentially. But we interview people in security. So we've had 4 guests so far. We've had Neil Lyons, we've had Steve Wilson, we've had Stu Kennedy, and just recently we had a guy called, don't know his name, he's going to hit me for this. It's called, his handle's some rando, so he's some random guy. He's an American blue teamer from the States. That makes sense. I'm also, as of last night, the PR manager for SecQueens. I'm also an honorary member. So those of you who don't know about SecQueens is a collective of 3 influential women in industry who have all, or are about to have all delivered talks at B-Size London, one of which won the Rookie Track last year, other of which won the Rookie Track the year before, I think, and who will win this year, hopefully. Morgan's going to be talking about Crypto You Cunts this year. That's the official title. So, yeah. There's no going back now. I'm also a beer farmer. We've got 2 other beer farmers speaking at Securi-Tay. We've got one on track 1, one on track 2. So we're going to have a brawl to the death to see who gets track 1 next year. So, the kind of agenda for the talk, why you've come to hear me speak. I'm going to be talking about red teaming, what the kind of differences are between it and pen testing. Discuss the key points around red teaming, so hopefully you'll take something away from this. Hopefully you won't get too kind of bogged down with the swearing. What makes up a red team? Not just the people, like all the knowledge points, the tactics, techniques and procedures, the important things, so basically don't fuck it up. Why do a red team? What's the objective? And then the all-important thing, which Morgan loves, why blue team is so sexy, it's excellent. You're just going to punch me after this. It's going to be great. It's also on video, so this is going to be the internet. People are not going to understand the inside jokes. It's going to be great. So yeah, diving in. Is there any questions so far? Nope, great. The difference between pen testing and red teaming. Who's heard of pen testing? Who's not heard of pen testing? You fucking heard of pen testing. Shut up. Who's heard of red teaming? Of course you've heard of red teaming. You're coming to see me talk about red teaming, but yeah. Who actively does red teaming? That's probably a better question. Who wants to actively do red teaming at some point in their life? That's good. Who does pen testing currently? Who's looking to progress into red teaming? Who does blue teaming? Yay, the good people. Who does purple teaming? Yay, the not so good people. So yeah. Before we dive in, does anyone know who that monkey is? It's me! That's TV Peru Monkey. That's me on Twitter, as of like 2 weeks ago for OPSEC reasons. So essentially, the difference between pen testing and red teaming. Penetration testing is done from a white, grey or black box perspective. What that means essentially is it's differing levels of access. Generally speaking, a pen test tends to be quite closed scope. So typically, you have network pen testing, you've got mobile, you've got cloud, because Aiden fucking loves clouds, other people's computers. Aidan sitting over there, one of my colleagues. You've also got, you've got web apps, you've got mobile apps, you've got infrastructure, you've got physical social engineering, you've got phishing, you've got like voice phishing, so calling people, you've got smishing, which is texting people. But from a pen test perspective, it's generally quite a closed scope. So you'd be like, right, this is the URL you have to look at. You're not allowed to go to any subdomains. You're not allowed to go at the IP or anything. Usually it's just the app. Or if you're going off the infrastructure, here's a /24. Go and scan it. /24 is 256 IPs technically, but we're not getting to technical stuff because this isn't a technical talk. You're looking at finding flaws and exploiting them, usually. Some companies sell penetration testing, which is really just going in and running Nessus and then getting a report. That's fucking bullshit. Don't do that. If you currently do that, I feel really sorry for you because you're not getting exposed to what pen testing really is. To explain the key terms, white, grey and black. It's not racism, it's actually a phrase. Okay, so white box testing is where you're given all access. Generally speaking, you get given credentials or source code or just kind of more of an understanding of the architecture. So if you're looking at a web application, 9 times out of 10, you'll be given probably the source code or understanding how the architecture fits together. If it's some of the fancy cloud shit, then I don't know about that stuff, but they'll give you access. Aidan knows more than me. Grey box testing is like, essentially, it's a bit more reserved, so maybe you won't be given the source code, but you'll be given slightly more access, but you're still focused on one area. And then black box testing is pretty much, it's not really real world because, well, people call it real world, where you're looking at an application or infrastructure or something with no prior knowledge. So you're just given a URL, you go in, you maybe given credentials or something, you need to find things. Or from infrastructure perspective, you go and scan it, you're looking for services, exploiting them, maybe you find telnet that's on the internet or whatever. Red teaming, however, red teaming is a bit more different from that. Red teaming is a bit more the kind of sexy stuff. That's like the kind of scary, fun stuff. Red teaming is essentially an exercise that simulates an advanced, persistent threat, which is not the definition on Twitter. I'm not going to say it because that's bad. The purpose of it, I'm reading this because this is a definition from Wikipedia. I'll actually explain what it is in a second. But the purpose is to exercise defensive people, processes, technology designed to detect and mitigate adversary actions. This should not be viewed as an advanced pen test. What that means in real people's terms, essentially, is it is a threat-based emulation of bad people, the bad cunts, right? Essentially, you're looking at where an organisation sits, what their threat profile is. So, say I am Acme Limited and I have a massive internet footprint and I'm being red teamed. The first thing the attackers are going to do is they're going to start gathering reconnaissance, which we're going to speak in a second, but they're going to look about what you've got on the internet, what you've got exposed, maybe you've got open ports, maybe you've got open services, and they're going to go and fuck you up royally. They're going to fucking bend you over a barrel and fuck you up. Might not be a barrel, might be I don't know. Essentially. But going to regret that later. Yeah, it's intelligence led. So you have smart people on it. No, it's not about smartness. It's basically you find information about the company, be it on forums, be it on things like Paceman, be it on GitHub. Use reconnaissance techniques to find out more about the company. So maybe you're given. So typically the scope of a red team is you're given the root domain. So maybe you're given acme.com or, for example, zsec.uk, which is my domain. And you have to go and find things about it. So the first thing I would do is I'd go and do subdomain enumeration passively. So you go and find what subdomains there are. Quite a lot of bug bounty hunters do this. They'll go and find kind of big like scopes and things. And you look for things that are like interesting looking. So maybe dev domains, UAT, all that sort of stuff. And then you're looking at the next step on from that is once you've got your collection of items you want to attack, you then start to look at the people, and this is where it gets fun. You get to stalk people and find out where they live and find out how big their tennis court is and all that shit. It's great. True story. You also get to see the kind of the darker sides, so you find interesting things about people on the internet. People, basically, if you've got bad OPSEC, I'm going to find out where you live. I'm going to find out where your kids go to school. I'm going to find out where you're married, where you got married and everything. I'm going to find the scary stuff about you, and then I'm going to target you with it, because I'm a bad person. Or I'm emulating a bad person, sorry, just put it back. You're also assessing an organisation's security at multiple levels. With a pen test, you're quite focused on like one area, whereas with red teaming, you're looking at the kind of perimeter security, you're looking at the people security, you're looking at the processes in place, you're looking at defensive measures in place. From that perspective, once you've done your perimeter assessment, you'll be looking at people individually, maybe looking at spear phishing, so targeting people with individual emails. So, I don't know, for example, one we did recently is IT have pushed out an update to your Office 365 setup. Please log in here to check your new update. And within about 8 seconds, we had 100 sets of credentials. So people still click on links. The age-old security problems with people clicking on things, it happens. And the only way to protect against that, realistically, is technical measures to stop people from clicking on things. That you can educate people to the highest help, but if you catch someone at the right time, you'll catch them phishing. Does anyone know Scott Helm? People have heard of Scott Helm, right? Little known fact, Scott Helm got phished and fucked off on Twitter. He was like, oh, Amazon sent me this email, and everyone was like, no, Scott, that's a phishing email, you fucking cunt. And he clicked on it and he gave his details away. But it happens to people. If you catch people at the right time, essentially what happened in that scenario was he orders something off Amazon, and at the same time he got a phishing email that was from Amazon. So if you catch people at the right time, you're going to get caught. Another quite key player in social engineering, has anyone heard of Chris Hagnagi? No? If you haven't heard of Chris Hagnagi, go and look him up. He's written a lot of books. He's probably the go-to guy for social engineering. He runs the social engineer village at DEF CON every year. Who's heard of DEF CON? Hey, who's been to DEF CON? Who wants to go to DEF CON? Okay, good. That's good. I'm not paying for tickets, but DEF CON's great. But essentially, Chris Hagnagi gets caught with phishing emails all the time, because if you catch someone at the right time, you're going to get caught. But he's admitted that. He wrote a book about phishing and he still gets caught. It's just a matter of time. So you've got your phishing, you've got your targeting, you've also got the physical social engineering aspect of things. So breaking into buildings. Quite a lot of the time, you hear about the sexy stories in security. You've got things like breaking into buildings, getting caught, running past armed cunts, all that sort of fun stuff. That happens. They are stories. They are legitimate things. In a red team, you're assessing the security from all multiple levels. So you're looking at, can I break into your building? Can I just walk past reception, plug in a laptop, and boom, I've got the main admin? Or is it a bit more difficult? Do I need to sweet talk my way past reception? Or do I do the sneaky route? Do I go in the back door and up the stairs and penetrate you from behind? It's going to be plenty of jokes. It's good. Good topic. Plenty of innuendos. Do I penetrate you from behind and go deeper and get into the network? That was a bad one. That was really bad. Just need to get a drink of water for that. But once I'm balls deep in, I really want to get deeper in the network. And essentially, or do I go in at night and be a bit more covert? I've heard of red teams before, but people, has anyone seen that there's a video online of an American red team where they go in proper tactical ops style and cut holes in fences and go in. Has anyone seen that? It was filmed on Wired a couple of years ago. Hack the Grid. Really good video. Totally not realistic, because nobody does that in the UK really that I know of. People do brand damage assessments, which is different from red teaming, and I might cover that later on. But essentially what they did is they took, I think it was a production company or some big company, and essentially they had big fences, barbed wire and everything. So they went through the woods, got duvets, put them over the barbed wire, as you do in Dundee on a Friday night, climb in, and basically, the tactical guys let the security guys in. Tactical guys let the technical guys in, and they went and plugged in, got access to the network, and got access to a bunch of stuff. But in real terms, that does happen. If I'm motivated enough as an attacker, I'm going to get into your network, be it via paying your employees 20 grand, via breaking into your building, via maybe just your external. Maybe you've got SQL injection in your external facing. I'm going to do it. So that is the difference between red teaming and pen testing. Now, the talks about red teaming, that's pen testing. Pen testing is fun. I've done it for 8 years now. It's good fun, but red teaming is where the sexy fun stuff is. So what actually makes up a red team? All that cool stuff, that is great, but realistically, when you're learning red teaming and all the kind of fun stuff, it's made up of maybe 3 key things, and 3 key things you sort of need to know about or need to start learning about. The first thing is MITRE ATT&CK. Who's heard of MITRE ATT&CK? Good. If you haven't heard about MITRE ATT&CK, there's a link at the end of the slide to go and read about it. MITRE ATT&CK is essentially a framework of lots of tactics, techniques, and procedures and common knowledge of threat actors. And it goes through various stages of a kill chain. So you've got initial access through to command and control. There's about 8 or 30, I don't know off by heart. There's basically a big table of 133 different techniques, and they're used by actual threat actors. So what are tactics, techniques, and procedures in actual fact? They are what you do, what an attacker does. So when I get onto your network, what's the first thing I'm going to do? Well, if I'm an Iranian, nation state, I'm going to go after certain bits of your infrastructure. I'm going to do certain types of techniques. Essentially what TTPs are is that you're profiling threat actors who are the bad bastards. So these icons here are they're made by FireEye. FireEye are a kind of, I suppose, they're a security company. They do basically threat intelligence and a few other bits and pieces, and they track threat actors actively. So they are APTs, Advanced Persistent Titties. Nobody laughed at that. I feel really bad. Anyway, the APT groups they're generally speaking, nation states are really, really, really motivated criminals. I mean, they're all criminals technically. Anything you do against the law is illegal because that's logic. And they've got different TTPs, so they do different things when they get into the network. And it's important to kind of understand that from a red team perspective, because when you're attacking a client network, you might have to emulate those TTPs. So you need to study what they're doing, how they do it, and then you need to build tools, because more often than not, a lot of the tools they use are they are their own custom tooling. So you need to then try and emulate that. So if you take, I don't know, North Korea, for example, which I think is that one, it looks like a North Korean flag. It might not be North Korea. North Korea's going to hack me now and I'm going to be fucked. I'm just going to disappear off the internet. It's going to be... Anyway, but they have specific TTPs they use on a network. I don't know them off by heart, but I'm going to assume they probably get in, they look for specific files, they maybe look for this, and then they try and use privileged accounts. A lot of things that threat actors tend to use now is living off the land, so they'll get their custom malware in, and then look at using inbuilt Windows binaries to kind of move around the network. So things like kind of bits admin, which is a tool that has a legitimate purpose, which I don't know what the legitimate purpose is, but I use it for malicious stuff. Essentially, you can pull stuff down with bits admin and run it. Things like run 32 DLL, you can call that and you can run PowerShell. Things like PowerShell. PowerShell is a system administration tool by default, but more and more, it's been used in the past as an attack vector for attackers. More and more threat actors are moving towards C# because as Windows 10 kind of moves on, things like AMSI is in place, so the anti-malware scanning interface, I think that's what it stands for. Essentially, that is stopping usage or starting to prevent usage of PowerShell. Now, those of you who are in the know, yes, it is coming into C# and it has started to be kind of dropped into the .NET framework, but the tradecraft, so the kind of TTPs of red teamers and attackers is starting to move towards C#. The other thing is indicators of compromise. Those who work in blue team will probably know this phrase very well. Indicators of compromise, and probably in red team as well. They are essentially, well, it's in the name, it's the indicators that your network has possibly been breached or there has been a known compromise somewhere. These things tend to be either hashes of files, so maybe kind of a SHA-256, some of a file, maybe known domains. So kind of the most kind of known one recently is the WannaCry malware. The IOC of that was a callback domain. If you were getting traffic across your network calling back to that domain, the chances are you've probably got something on your network that's bad, and you may be the victim of ransomware, or maybe you've got good security. Other things that fall under IOCs are things like emails. So from a red team perspective, what we'd list in a report is what we'd use for command and control. So C2 servers, we'd have domains, IPs, email addresses. Depending if they've been burned or not, if they're used for long-term engagements, you wouldn't list them. Potential aliases. So if you're social engineering people on LinkedIn saying, "Oh, hi, I'm Bill Smith from Microsoft. Here, have a free product sample. Download my malicious malware. Please run it." It does work. I did it last week. People just click on things. I don't know why. Bill Smith isn't the real name. That's just an alias. Don't worry. You'd list that in the report. But these are things that when you feed them back, if you find them on your network, chances are you're probably going to catch pen testers rather than actual threat actors. But if you're doing a proper red team, you're actually simulating what a threat there is. So, and also attack. Minor attack, I talked about at the start, it is adversary, tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. That's what ATT and CK stands for. And they made it attack because it looks sexy. And blue and red because blue and red. So, what makes up a typical engagement? For me, it makes up a bunch of memes because memes are great. Essentially, you start off with threat intel and recon, then you move on to initial foothold, then you weaponize and delivery, and then you start to enumerate your environment, and then finally hunt your objectives. But what does that mean in real terms? So I talked about at the start about threat intelligence. The first step of any red team or any simulated attack is your reconnaissance of your target. If you don't know who you're attacking or what they've got, you've not got a chance in hell of getting what you want to get. Typically speaking, you'll be set out objectives. So you're looking at, for example, say you're going after a car manufacturer, for example. You might want to go after their intellectual property. So maybe you want to find out their future developments. Or maybe you want to target their board. So you're going after specific areas of financial records or other areas of the network. So during the threat intelligence or recon phase, you're looking at how to find that on the internet using various techniques. So there are tools out there that are open source, there are closed source tools out there, there are threat intelligence companies that specialise in this. I'll come out and say I'm not a threat intelligence expert, but I do work with people who are threat intel experts. I know how to do OSINT, open source intelligence gathering. I know how to do a bit of recon. I can search Google, I can do all that sort of stuff. But the threat intel guys, they know their shit. They're really good at finding people and doing things. So what do they actually do? Well, they search things like the darknet, scary fucking dark side of the internet for all the dodgy porn and all that stuff. No, they don't search the dodgy porn. They search the dodgy people on dodgy forums. So if you are, if you're targeting a business, and maybe on the dark, but actually probably a big one. Has anyone heard of OnlyFans? Everyone, yeah, you're all dirty cunts. OnlyFans got apparently breached yesterday. Nobody knows why or how, or somebody might have just been collecting things, but typically speaking, that data will then be sold on the dark web or sold on another marketplace. And that information, maybe not the pictures, but the actual content behind it will be useful for someone who's emulating an attacker. So during the recon phase, you may be looking through password dumps and things like that to find credentials that might be in use. Because if you're stupid, like most people are, you might use your OnlyFans login for your corporate email, because people do that. Or maybe you might use your corporate email for your OnlyFans login, because you're even more mental. And you find that sort of shit. The big ones like Ashley Madison and stuff like that, like loads of credentials are harvested. So then what you try is, once you've got all your credentials together, you look at trying them against services. So you do what I was talking about earlier, you find all the subdomains, find things that look like login portals and try credentials against them, which is called credential stuffing. A lot of attackers use it. It's quite a script kiddie technique. It doesn't work that often, but things like two-factor authentication counteract that, but there are ways past that, which we'll talk about in a second. What you'll also do during the threat intelligence and recon phase is you'll find out more about the company. So typically speaking, you'll start to stalk people on LinkedIn or just stalk people in real life. I wouldn't recommend it. You do get kind of stopped sometimes, like, why you follow me? I don't follow people, just to clarify. But you find out what the company does. So maybe you go, if you're doing the physical side of things, so physical, you follow people and maybe try and steal their badge, or maybe try and take a kind of swipe of it like a Proxmark, so RFID coding, like the stuff in Mission Impossible. Or you're looking at their profile on LinkedIn. Some IT admins love to overshare on LinkedIn. Oh, I'm a MS SQL 2005 database expert. Oh, we use, Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection inside. I've deployed it across an estate. It's like, how long have you been working for the company? Right, you've been working there for about 10 years. ATP only came out a couple of years ago. You probably use ATP internally. Then you look at the other things they've got. It's like, oh, well, I'm also a certified Cisco firewall expert. It's like, or you've probably got ASAs in place. And you start to build up a bigger picture of what the company does. But then you can go a bit deeper, because people love to use things like Facebook and Twitter to share things. So you find someone on LinkedIn, you kind of cross-reference them, and you find that on Twitter they follow Microsoft, they follow Intel, they follow McAfee, because John McAfee's a fucking legend. He's not, he's a fucking psychopath who loves bath salts. But yeah, they follow these kind of people, and you start to build up a more holistic understanding of what that person is. And what that allows you to do is start to craft phishing attacks and start to craft social engineer attacks. So if you find out that someone's a massive cokehead, you can start to be like, well, found out you're a cokehead, I can get you a gram for this much. A gram, yeah. I don't know how much a gram is, I don't do cocaine. I'm a good boy. Because cocaine's bad. Don't do drugs, kids. It's bad. I hope this has not been recorded. But yeah, you find out about the person, you start to profile them more, and you build up a bigger picture. I use my hands a lot when I'm talking. I've just noticed this. Big pictures. So once you've got your picture of someone, your profile of someone, not your picture, you then start to look at your initial foothold. So how are you going to get into the network? How are you going to get into the company? Are you going to try and kidnap them, put them in the back of a van, ram the reception and break in? It's been done. I've heard people have done that in the past. Or are you going to find out what technology they use and start to craft maybe a phishing email? Or maybe you find their domains and you register a copycat domain or something that's got a bit more high reputation. So say, for example, there's a red team coming up in 6 months' time and it's against company X. You do a bit of passive reconnaissance in advance and you find things that maybe look similar. So maybe a company owns company.com, but they don't own company.co or .co.uk, and they're a UK firm. So you buy company.co.uk and you buy company.co and you clone their website and you just redirect it to their website. So what that does is Google sees that and goes, oh, it's just, maybe they bought it for brand reputation. So you start to build up reputation of the domain. By having a reputable domain, you can start to craft more kind of sneaky attacks. So you can use that for a multitude of ways. Depending on how the company have got their outbound firewall set up, sometimes you can use that for exfiltrating data. I've seen companies who just whitelist their company name rather than company.com or whatever, and if you can get that in place, you can start to exfiltrate data to that. But that's jumping the gun. First of all, you need to get in. So getting in, you register your domain 6 months in advance or whatever, or a period in advance, or you buy an expired domain, which I've seen a lot of threat actors start to use now, where you look at expireddomains.net, which is a domain that lists all domains have expired, funnily enough, in the last 24 hours. And that updates, I think it might even be the last hour or something. It updates constantly. And there are millions of domains on there. And what it does is it lists all the things like backlinks, the Alexa ranking, all that sort of stuff. And as a threat actor or someone who's emulating a threat actor, I want to get a domain that's got high reputation, because your security or even your network preventative measures are more likely to trust it if it's a reputable domain. Now, don't go buying pornhub.co or something, because that's probably going to get blacklisted. But go and buy something like, I don't know, onepennyfinance.com, for example. That might be an old finance website and it's got finance reputation, and if you're using a corporate proxy, it's more likely to get out. So you buy your domain, you register your email address, you then start to, you've profiled a person, and then you start to craft a phishing campaign. So more often than not, the initial foothold will be via phishing. People have received spam emails, you've received money from a Nigerian prince who's never sent you the money and still chasing them for it. It's really annoying. Guaranteed me a couple of million, pay off my speeding ticket, no problem. Yeah. Or I might not have a car when this goes out, we'll find out. Yeah. This is awkward. So you craft your phishing email. And your phishing email, typically, depending on who you're emulating, so if you pick a specific threat actor who has a specific level of kind of complexity, you start to craft your phishing around that. So maybe one threat actor uses surveys as a phishing vector. You craft something that looks like a survey. Oh, hi, such and such, we're doing an update of our health and safety. Could you please go through this assessment? And that link will go to what looks like a clone of a corporate portal. The corporate portal will maybe prompt you for domain credentials, and what that's doing is that's credential harvesting. So you send that link in, and maybe you send it to 100 people, but it's kind of crafted for those 100 people. So maybe you get the first names, you go, hi Bill, hi Jane, hi Blair, whatever, click on this, and it makes people feel more personal. They go, oh, this email's for me, it's addressed to me. You don't do what I've heard someone fucked up, not a pen test company, but a threat actor, hi first name, last name. Someone fucked that up royally. You send it in, and they click it in, and you get credentials. And then what you can do is, if they don't have two-factor authentication, or even if they do have two-factor authentication, you can use that to log into external portals. So if they've got two-factor authentication, there's a tool called Evil Engine X. Has anyone heard of it before? If you haven't, go and look it up. It's a great tool. It's built for legitimate purposes, I think. Essentially, what it does is it mirrors and proxies a site through a malicious server. So what you do is you take a login form. So, for example, maybe you've got Office 365. You take portal.office.com, for example. You proxy it through Evil Engine X. What it will do is it will capture the credentials. It will log them on the server, and what it will also do is log the two-factor authentication token, and it will stop the user from submitting them to Microsoft or whatever service they're going to. So that way you can capture the two-factor authentication token. They usually have a window of about a minute. So you've got a minute to log in, and then you're into the system. It's a bypass for two-factor authentication. Now, what it doesn't, or I think the limitations are things like YubiKeys and kind of hard tokens. But if you type in like a 6-digit code or like a 6-character code, chances are you can be pwned with Nginx. Now, you need to have a pretty convincing phishing campaign, but people are stupid, people are fucking retards, they will click on things. So once you've got your initial foothold, say you get credentials, you log in, you find they've got a VPN endpoint, you get your two-factor authentication, boom, you're on the domain. What the fuck do you do now? You go... That was really well timed to win that. So the weaponization and delivery. So the initial foothold could be credentials. It could also be malware. So a lot of the time you're emulating a threat actor that uses specific types of malware. So maybe we're using POSH C2, which is a command and control framework written by a company called Netitude. It's a PowerShell-based tool that essentially sets up a client and server setup. It generates payloads on the fly that are in C#. They're also PowerShell. There's also macros. There's also DLLs. There's shellcodes. There's lots. There's about 20 or 30 payloads. Now, I think it's APT 14 or 41. The group you can look it up after this, they use POS-C2, so that is a known indicator compromise that they use. So if you're emulating that threat group, you can use that. Or, I mean, you can use any C2 you want. A lot of threat actors use Cobalt Strike, which is another one. It's a paid for. As you mentioned, POS-C2 is free, so you can go download it and try it at home. Don't phone people because it's illegal, unless you have permission. So yeah, you'd use that, you'd get your payload, and then you'd send it in. So more often than not, a lot of companies... Who uses Minecast here as an email protection method? Silence. Nobody. Okay. Who uses Office 365? Who uses email? Does anyone use email? Yeah, is that going out of fashion? So those who use Minecast, Minecast is pretty good. I mean, this is a vendor agnostic talk. I don't recommend vendors at all. Minecast is actually quite easy to bypass if you have high reputation domains. But essentially, companies use Minecast. It will filter. It's a perimeter security program. It filters what comes inbound and outbound for your emails. So if you send a link in and Minecast is turned up to 11, it will essentially filter out the link and be like, go here to enroll your device. Do you trust this link? And it kind of adds that second factor of, oh, hold on a second, Microsoft aren't emailing me saying I've won £100. So it makes you think. I mean, some people still click through, but it's a preventive measure. It's a technical measure to stop people from fucking themselves up royally. And your phishing protection, it does that. So what you would do to bypass that is, instead of maybe sending a link in, you might send an attachment in. So to weaponize and deliver, you send your malicious implant in. That's maybe a macro-enabled document. More often than not, they're either a document or a PDF file. They're both used. You also get HTA files, which are used less and less because they tend to be blocked by things like Outlook. And you send that in, and what that will have in it is usually a dropper, so like a piece of code that will pull down the malware. It's used by red teamers, it's used by pen tests, it's used by malicious threat actors. And essentially what that's doing is that's getting your kind of initial foothold in the network, and then it's pulling down whatever it needs. So it's establishing kind of communications outbound. So you deliver that into the target, and then you get onto the network, and then it's enumeration time. It's SpongeBob time, SpongeBob SquarePants. You get your foothold in, you get your shell back, and you find out, oh, actually I'm logged in as Jane Smith, and Jane Smith or Bill Smith, doesn't matter, anyone Smith. You find out what the domain is, you start to enumerate it. If you've done your reconnaissance and you've done your homework, you'll start to understand what the company's doing internally. So have they got NetFlow heuristics in place? Can they see what your traffic is doing? Do they use things like Darktrace or other software that's like PAM-based authentication, like privileged accounts? So if I get domain admin, am I going to be able to log into a workstation without flagging it? Conversely, have they got a blue team? Because they might have all the sexy toys, but if they don't have people to actually run the toys, then you can fly past the radar. You're only as loud. I made some cool quote on Twitter, and I can't remember what it exactly, but basically you can be as loud as you want if nobody's listening, which is true. Because if you don't have a blue team in place or even a defensive team, because a lot of times the IT team is integrated into the defensive team, that aren't watching the alerts, or maybe they're getting 1 million alerts a day, they're not going to see you. So a red team I did back in, I think it was November, they spend like, I think it was $8 million a year on defensive products, which sounds like a lot of money, but they're a multi-billion-dollar company. And they had like all the bells and whistles. They had a SIEM, they had endpoint protection, so EDR, endpoint defense and response. They had a blue team. I say a blue team because they didn't see fuck all for the whole 8 weeks we were doing the engagement, but we then did a noise-based assessment, and then they saw us, apparently. So essentially what happened in that engagement is we fished in, we got a connection back to the shell, and this was like week 2 of every 8-week engagement. So you don't want to get burned in the second week if you can help it, because it makes the next 8 weeks not so fun. So we got in, we started to look around the network, so we enumerated shares, but this was done really slowly. So one thing to keep in mind when you're doing red teaming is kind of being slow and stealthy. You're looking to fly under the radar, so you have a kind of, instead of, like, who's used Meterpreter, for example, like Metasploit? Metasploit calls back instantly, like you're getting instant kickback. The difference between that and a command and control server is you've usually got a sleep time. So if you send a command, it'll send it to the client, which is on the host, and it'll wait there until on a specified period of time before it calls back for stealthiness, so it flies under the radar. So what was happening in this scenario was we'd got in, and we were I think we'd set our beacon time to about an hour, so we were getting a call back every hour. So we had set like an auto run to like find out the domain, find out the user, the groups, all that sort of stuff, and then a call back every hour. But we quickly found out that we were doing stuff that was quite stealthy. So for like a week and a half, we'd found out where the network was, where the shares were, what users were logged in where. We'd done enumeration of Active Directory. We'd done all that sort of fun stuff. And then we're like, well, let's just try and ramp up the noise a little bit. Because we spoke to the client, like, yeah, we're in. He was like, no, you shouldn't be in. We've got all this fancy toys. Like, no, we are in. We've bypassed it. We're in. Right, okay, so if you ramp up the noise, so we changed the beacon time down to a minute. Because if you've got good people that are on your kind of in your SOC or your perimeter, you're seeing traffic going to like a domain. You'll see a lot of traffic, but if you're seeing like a random domain that looks really weird, you're going to look at it. But they didn't see anything. So we're going through the network. We set the beacon to a minute, so it was calling back, and we're doing stuff a little bit more noisy. So running like net commands. Top tip: if you run something like net user or net group on a workstation that's got endpoint protection on it, so like a good EDR solution like CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or Tanium or something like that, it will flag it as being anomalous and potentially malicious. You might think that net user isn't malicious, but if it's set up correctly, it will flag it because. First of all, that user doesn't usually use PowerShell or command prompt, and second of all, why the fuck are they enumerating all the users on the box? They shouldn't have to, unless they're maybe an admin or something. So it will flag an anomalous activity. The second thing is, if you get access, so first of all you get access as like a baseline user, then you privilege escalate to maybe like a local admin, or maybe even domain admin if you're shit hot, you're getting in there in 5 minutes, boom, domain admin. You're using your account to log in and access things, but if they've got defensive measures in place, I'll get back to the story in a second, don't worry, we'll prepare for that second. If you're doing all if you're using a privileged account, and they're not used to seeing a domain admin logging into a network, they'll start to see anomalous activity, or at least you hope they will. So in this story, we got domain admin quite quickly because they were logged into the machine we'd fished. We ran a tool called Mimikatz. It was custom packed, but essentially what Mimikatz does is it dumps the passwords out of memory and keys and all this sort of fun stuff. So cache credentials, all that fun stuff. And we used those credentials to log in as domain admin on the same machine. Now the same machine was just a workstation, so we were ramping up the noise slowly, and by this point we were thinking, right, we've probably been burned. We've surely been burned. You don't log in as domain admin to just a workstation. You usually log into servers. But no, we were fine, so we kept progressing. Then we RDP'd onto the server state. So they had somewhat segregation in place. Like you couldn't route to it directly via SMB, but they had WinRM and RDP open for administrations. WinRM is a remote administration. It's a legitimate function on Windows. If you use that to log into the machine and start to enumerate around, what we found on the server state is there was no endpoint protection at all. So they had like their workstations locked down to ship. There was nothing on the servers. We're like, right guys, it's fucking party time. Let's go and do everything. So we had a tool called Bloodhound on just the server state, so you can basically tune it for specific ranges and target them. So they had a DC and it had all the server ranges. And basically what Bloodhound does is it enumerates Active Directory for all the trust relationships, users, groups, sessions, computers on the network, and everything that's in Active Directory. Active Directory being the mothership of a Windows network, and usually an enterprise network. And it will find you kind of routes to domain admin, routes to privileged accounts, routes to all sorts of fun things. It's a free tool. It's built by a company called SpectreOps, who are a US-based firm that do red teaming. And essentially, it's a great tool because it gives you a visual picture of what your Active Directory looks like. So we ran that. We found out that actually we had what we thought was domain admin, but in actual fact it was an account that was called domain admin that didn't have domain admin privileges. It could just log into servers. So we're like, okay, so we can't add anyone to the network. We can't do any modification of domain admin. Can't do any modification of Active Directory. Did I speak fast? Or everyone keeping up okay? Yeah, good. I've just realised I'm like rattling through time. So yeah, we enumerated Active Directory. We found that we had access to just this account, but it had a route to enterprise admin. So we're like, right, fuck domain admin, we're getting enterprise admin. Enterprise admin is like the keys to the kingdom. So we logged into a server, ran Mimikatz again, boom, enterprise admin. But that wasn't the goal. The goal of the engagement was to get access to the crown jewels. So they had like 25 applications that dealt with pretty highly sensitive data. And at this point, because we had access to Active Directory, we went, right, fuck it boys, we're going to run... we're basically going to run Secrets Dump, which is a tool for dumping ntds.dit. ntds.dit is where all your passwords are stored for your entire Active Directory. So this is a massive company. I think in total they had 150,000 users, so that's 150,000 hashes, so we had to track them. So we ran them through a graphics card rig, took about 2 weeks, cracked 98% of the domain. So the password policy of 8 characters. 8 characters is shit if you've got a good rig. So we got all the passwords, and then we're like, right, okay, we need to go after the applications for the crown jewels. So going after the crown jewels, we found that a lot of users, although they had separate authentication for these applications, users are like, they're dumb. They'll just kind of, they'll reuse their passwords. So we logged in, and sure enough, within about maybe I think it was within about 2 days we had access to their endpoint detection software. So we could see in real time what we were doing. So we were running things and going, right, okay, we'll just delete that from the logs, just so they didn't see it. And the blue team were seeing none of this. So it got to the end of the engagement, 8 weeks later, and we were having like a wash-up call, which was maybe like 4 hours, sitting down with the blue team going, right, we've done this. Because another thing, part of red team is you always keep timestamps of what you're doing so you can go back and correlate against like logs and all this other fun stuff. We were going through everything, and essentially we were like, well, phone's ringing for fuck's sake. That's not what we said, but we said we ran all this. Did you see any of it? And they went, actually, no, we didn't. And we're like, right, okay. So we went through, we had access at this point to the head of Blue Team's emails. And we went into his inbox, and his unread alerts was like 29 million unread emails. Like, yeah, you got a bit of a problem here. So they essentially had to tune their endpoint protection to see things. So we helped them with that. So, yeah, that's essentially what a red team is. Why do a red team? So this is probably really small back. What that says is that is to assess, spelled wrong, assess an organisation's security overarching. Essentially a holistic view of security. This is why you do a red team. You do a red team to assess your whole company. You do it to assess because you've spent £8 million on defensive software that is really good at what it does, but if it's not tuned properly and you've not got the specific people to kind of use it, it's no use. You're spending £8 million. You might as well be fucking thrown out of the window for all we care. You're also looking at improving blue team metrics, because the red teaming comes from military. It comes from all the sexy, like, kind of emulating an attack against the country, or kind of testing your national security. I hate the phrase national security. It's awful. It's just really American shit. But yeah, you're looking at it comes from military because you're testing what defensive capability is. So from a technical perspective, you're looking at testing what your defensive measures in place. If you spend £8 million, but if that £8 million is not doing anything, you're looking at improving the metrics you've got. So maybe you can spend that £8 million on a SIEM, so a security incident. Oh fuck, I don't know what it stands for. Event management. That's the one. Security and event management solution that you can actually control, and you can actually see and tune it for things like Kerberoasting, things like adding a machine to the domain. Who works in Blue Team and actually monitors adding new machines to the domain? Nobody. Start doing it. If you see a rogue machine added to your domain with random credentials, it's suspicious. And I do it all the time. Standard users can add up to 10 machines to a domain. So if you're not locking that down, lock it down. And if you all work in Red Team, that's a good tip. If you get a set of credentials, add a machine to the domain because it doesn't have endpoint protection on it. If there's net flow in place, it becomes a problem. What you're also doing is you're looking at the time to detect and time to respond. So it might be all fine and well if the blue team catch you, but if the blue team do fuck all, you're fine. Like, you can be on a network and you'll be like, right, okay, we spotted you. Like, yeah, you spotted us, but we've got domain admin and we're doing whatever else. If you don't stop us, it's not a proper assessment of your defense. Because in a real scenario, you'd be like, right, boys, we've been breached. We spotted them, done fuck all about it because we spotted them. But if you do fuck all about it, well, what's going to happen there? All your data is going to disappear onto the internet. It's going to appear on Pastebin, or it's going to go on GitHub or whatever else. So what we're doing is we're looking at the time to detect and respond. So yeah, if you spot people that are malicious, always, unless told otherwise, respond to it and triage it and move it off the network. Now onto the fun, sexy slide. Blue Team is just as sexy as Red Team. That's not what that says, but yeah. When you're learning Red Team, it's important to learn blue teaming techniques as well. Because not only is it important from the perspective of it's nice to know what you're coming up against, it's also important so that you can advise your clients and potential teams on what to do. If you're doing red teaming and you don't understand how a SIEM works, yes, I don't know what it stands for, but I do know how it works. You can tell them to tune it better. So maybe go and learn how Splunk works. Go and learn how Helk works, which is an Elk stack, which has lots of different plugins for, it's called Hunter Elk. Elk, which is Elastic Logarithm, and I'm really bad at acronyms anyway. It's a SIEM, it's an open source SIEM for storing security events. If you can learn how that works, you can start to advise how to better help people. You can also learn how to bypass it. So if you're logging for specific things, you can start to look at outside that, kind of outside the box. You need to learn before you can walk. You need to learn to walk before you can run. It's been a long talk, right? Learn to defend just as you're attacking. So, because the thing is, blue team is good fun, and I've actually found this from doing more and more attack. You find out that red teamers and attackers only need to be lucky once. Defenders need to be fucking on the ball all the time. And it's probably the more difficult job than red teaming. Yes, we need to bypass defensive measures, but the people who are controlling them, you shut the fuck up. People who... The video's going to be like, Andy's just shouting at the window. Angry man shouts at cloud. Or elderly, I don't know. So yeah, I can't remember what I was saying. I'm shouting at clouds. Essentially, you need to learn to defend before you can attack, because you need to learn how the tooling works so you can bypass it, also learn how you can implement it. Yeah, no, what's talking about is blue team's more interesting, because the difficult job we have as red teamers is telling you how to effectively defend your network. I can tell you how I'm going to attack you, but I can't always tell you the best way to defend, because there are so many different solutions out there. There isn't a one silver bullet fills all. There isn't, like, the same thing with red teaming. You can't just do one red team a year and go, oh, we're secure, we've been red teamed. You realistically need to have a more kind of defense in depth. So you're looking at having a security program, having pen testing done, having maybe red teaming. The thing with red teaming is, and the thing that really fucking irks me with salespeople in all companies I work for, they sell red teaming like it's going out of fashion. Like, oh yeah, red teaming. It's like, does the company have a blue team? No, don't fucking sell a red team then, because there's no point. Do they have a defensive team? No. Well, we're just going to fucking wipe the floor with them. We're going to wreck house, fucking make money, no bother. But if there's nothing to defend and nothing to protect, they're getting no value out of it. So realistically, you have a more kind of structured program where you look at consultancy, you look at implementing defensive. Maybe you go into defensive consultancy because you understand the attacker mindset. And I hopefully at SteelCon and hopefully at B-Sides London, Neil Lyons and I are going to run a workshop which is attacking techniques for defenders, teaching defenders to attack. Because more often than not, people that go into defense, they're shit hot at what they do, but sometimes they don't understand what pen testing does. Not that they don't understand what a pen test is, but they maybe don't understand the tooling and don't think like an attacker. A key point is I was in a meeting with a client a couple of weeks ago, sitting down with their blue team, really senior guys, know all their stuff, and senior people, they weren't just guys. I use guys collectively, but it's people. They all know their stuff. Got to be inclusive and all that shit, all the genders. Get them in. Everyone.
This is why you're in track 3.
This is why I'm in track 3. That's the quote at the top. This is why you're in track 3. No, so they're really, really inclusive. They know their shit, but they'd never seen craft map exec before. They'd never seen these flags in Nmap. They use Nmap for discovering ports to the network, but they'd never seen why actually you can spoof flags because they don't need to. They're using their own tools. Likewise, they knew more about ATP than I did because they were really tuned on how to use advanced threat protection, Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection. And I learned a lot from them, but I was like, right guys, I'm going to go into the network and I'm going to plug in. What have you got? Have you got network access control? Yes. Right, I'm going to bypass that. How are you going to bypass that? Right, I'm going to take a phone out of a meeting room. I'm going to copy the MAC address. I'm going to make that my MAC address. Boom, on your network. Oh, we didn't think of that because think like a hacker. If you're a blue teamer, think like a hacker. Think what is the most ridiculous thing you can ever think of that's going to happen on the network? It'll probably happen. If someone's going to do something ridiculous on the network, if someone's going to do something stupidly noisy, they're probably going to do it at some point. It might be even the most script-kiddie thing. If you run something like Armitage, Hail Mary on a network, I've seen it happen. And if the blue team can't spot that, what fucking chance have they got of spotting like real... 10 minutes, okay, cool. What chance have they got of spotting real things? The other thing is start to look at threat actors. Start to look at what people are using. So it might be all fine and well monitoring a network for people going to Pornhub and people clicking on bad things, but if you're not looking at what are emerging threats, you're not actually maturing as an organisation. You're not actually learning what your organisation is doing. So onto the kind of next slide. So blue team's all sexy and great. Kind of learning the red team ropes. So you're all here because you want to learn red teaming, and hopefully you've taken a bit of interesting information away, more than a just sweary Scotsman stand up and chat shite for an hour. This is what I recommend for anyone who's wanting to learn red teaming, or just pen testing in general, or offensive techniques. Learn more about Windows. Learn about Active Directory. Build labs at home. Build labs in the cloud. Build labs. Go and, if you've got a little bit of time, a little bit of money, go and, I'll publish the slides afterwards as well, but feel free to take pictures. Go and build labs at home. My colleague Neil has written an excellent blog post about how to build an Active Directory lab at home. If you scroll down the whole article, there is a one-liner PowerShell that does it in one go, but it's interesting to read it because you learn about how it all fits together. The more you can learn about building, the better you'll be at breaking it, and the better you'll be about defending it. If you can understand how Active Directory works inside out and how GPO works inside out, so group policy objects, you can start to defend better and roll out better policies. Likewise, if you're an attacker, if you can learn how those work, you can push out malicious policies and start to pwn a network. There'll be a talk coming soon with Neil and I where we actually pwn a network using just GPO, so I'm going to say that and it's now not going to get accepted and this is going to be the internet forever. Like, oh, nobody's ever going to see this talk. You've all heard it, so... Anyway, for students and people who are just interested, Hack the Box is a great resource. There is the Pro Labs out there, not Pro Labs, Pro Labs. I might not publish this on YouTube, to be honest. Hack the Box, the Pro Labs, you've got Raster Labs and Offshore. Raster Labs is actually both of them are emulated enterprise environments. They are both, I think they're around about £70 a month. They're really good and they're worth checking out. Minor Attack, go and read it. It's a great resource. Learn about threats and things. Go and read FireEye's blog. There are a lot of other companies out there. Talos have a blog. SecureWorks have a blog. There's lots of other threat intel companies out there that have blogs. FireEye publish all the kind of the new and upcoming threats. They also publish old. There's blog posts for weeks that you can go and read about how people attack things and do things. Finally, kind of a bit of there'll be questions in a second. Don't worry. I wrote a blog post about this, so it's got all the bits and pieces. Here's all the Twitter, so go and follow me on Twitter if you don't already. Go and follow my podcast. Go and listen to it. It's fucking great. Go and follow the Sec Queens. We're fucking ace. And the slide theme is courtesy of a company called Slides Go. I edited some of them. They didn't provide the memes because I'm fucking awesome at memes. So feel free to take a picture and tweet it and all that shit. At me on Twitter. It's great. I love it. Don't put me on follow friends because I'll fucking kill you. Has anyone got any questions? Yes.
OSCP and CREST exams, best preparation methods and ways to get there.
Okay, so the question was OSCP and CREST exams, best preparation methods. OSCP, I'd say Hack the Box. There's a lot of labs on Hack the Box. Likewise, CREST and Tiger and those kind of exams, they are assault courses, so they are looking at kind of enumerating. So it's all about enumeration. I fucking hate OffSec where they go try harder. Realistically, go and Google things or just try things or just ask people. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're doing the exam, obviously don't ask questions, but like if you're coming up to ask questions, reach out to me. My DMs are open. I get all sorts of weird DMs from people, but I'm happy to help. People have given talks in the past. They've asked me for help and apparently I've been useful. So, any other questions? Oh, come on. There must be some question. I've not baffled you all for an hour. Yes?
Yeah, you're talking about how standard users can actually ask computers to AD.
Yep.
How does it happen? Every AD I've done, you need to have at least the main admin right to be able to add a computer.
No. By default, from Windows 7 to Windows 10, I think they might have... Windows 7 to Windows 10, and if the domain controller is 2012 to 2016, they fixed it in 2019, a standard user has privileges to add a machine to the domain. All they need is to be on the domain or know the DNS.
So you have to maintain it on
it's tied to the OU. So the users group, if you use a separate OU, so if you take users and put them in a separate OU, then you can restrict that. But by default, if I get standard credentials, I can add a machine to the domain. You can lock it down. I think I've got a blog post upcoming on how to do that. There is a specific OU you can set on a user that means that they can't do the specific things to add machines to the domain.
Can that be set via group policy or that needs to be...
Yeah. It can be set via group policy. Any other questions? Yes, Stuart?
Active Directory so that you can understand more about the organisation and the applications that you use.
So how to back up Active...
Once you've got it,
yeah,
then you can obviously dig deep. What are the best things to be looking for?
So best things to be looking for. So the question is, what's the best things to look for in Active Directory once you've got an understanding of it? If you're looking at it from a defensive and locking down perspective, look for accounts that maybe have too many privileges. So maybe RDP access to servers. 5 minutes, okay. RDP access to servers, RDP access to maybe machines. Look for users that maybe have unnecessary access or unnecessary paths. Run Bloodhound on your network. Bloodhound will allow you to visualize what things look like. So if you right click on a user, you can find a path to domain admin or find a path to domain controllers or servers. Likewise, what Bloodhound will also do is show you specific privileges they've got. So if they've got debug privileges, for example, they can run Mimikatz. And if your AV is not so good, they can dump things from memory. Likewise, you can recompile things like Mimikatz and use them for malicious. It's a malicious tool, but you can pack it and make it bypass AV. So to go back to the original question, how to find or what to look for unnecessary privileges, look for maybe too many sessions of a machine. So if you've got a user, for example, a server's account that is old, look for accounts that haven't had their password changed in a number of years. more often than not, the vector into a network is via a service account. So look for the SPNs, the service... Neil's going to kill me. The SPNs essentially accounts that have access to right to specific services. They are targeted in Kerberos thing, and that's an attack vector. So look for those. Look for users that have maybe not logged in a while. So if they are dormant in your Active Directory, and as a result they maybe log in, or their last login was yesterday, and you're not used that account, mark that as suspicious. That's pretty much it. Any other questions? Probably time for one more. Yes.
Just one more thing to the Active Directory. You're going to want to check out Azure and the resources and federation services that they have as well, because typically in an engagement, if they have a cloud infrastructure or hybrid cloud, there might be some quick wins targeting the cloud first before the on-premise. So anyone that hasn't done that before, they've actually improved. It used to be shit, but Azure has free resources from Microsoft, and you can go through those courses. I would suggest it because there's a lot of scripting. So you can spin up VMs, do a lot of stuff automatically, and it gives you knowledge on how the scripts are used, like PowerShell, etc.
Yeah. One thing I'd also add: if you don't use, so in your user environments, things I see in client networks all the time is users having access to things like PowerShell, CMD, FTP, curl, all these sort of things. Lock it down. Users shouldn't have access to PowerShell. They shouldn't have access to command prompt. They shouldn't really have access to anything but Word, Office. Also disable macros by default. Disable it via group policy. Don't disable it in the local endpoint. Disable it via group policy. You'll certainly reduce your footprint. And of all things, enable two-factor authentication and monitor kind of weird times of authentication. If you've got a user who's based in Glasgow and they're authenticating at 4 a.m, either one, they're a insomniac, or two, something's going wrong. Okay? That's pretty much it. Hopefully you've had a bit of kind of understanding into red teaming. I'll be around at the conference all day if people want to ask questions. People don't like asking questions in big groups because we're all fucking introverts and all that shit. Go and see Sophia's talk later on. It's in track 3 at what time? It's later on anyway. It's talking about car hacking. It'll be fucking ace. Thanks folks.